Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the Walther PPQ SC on the table, the long-awaited subcompact version of the PPQ. And we'd done a quick show and tell on this a week or two ago when we first got our hands on it. They're still pretty scarce, but we've had time to put actually several hundred rounds through it. It's been absolutely flawless as far as function and reliability. So now it's time to actually talk about it. Of course, we do have Walther here. In the past, if you had been interested in getting a subcompact from Walther in a double stack, you'd have been looking at something like this P99C, which is about the same size. I'm going to set them all up and show you some different size comparisons. But this weighs 21.7 ounces. The PPQ SC, according to Walther's site, weighs 21.2, and when we weigh it, it comes up as 21.4. So, a couple tenths of a pound different. I'm sorry, a couple tenths of an ounce. Or you might be looking at the ever-popular Glock 26, which is also the market that the PPQ SC is trying to get into. This also weighs 21.7 ounces, so both of them are a little bit heavier than the SC. From a size perspective, it's 6.6 inches long. It's 4.4 inches tall when you have the flush mount magazine with it. And of course, it is unloaded. And the flush mount magazine that comes with it holds 10 rounds. And there's also a extended magazine that's available that holds 15, and it comes with it. Now both of these magazines show on Walther's site with part numbers and everything, but when you click the link, it just takes you to the home page of the store. They're not available yet. So the two magazines that you get with it are the two magazines you're going to use for a period of time. And that's pretty normal with the first intro of a gun. Magazines always seem to be behind the curve. So you've got either 10 round or 15 round capacity in a very small, streamlined 2-finger grip package. So for concealed carry, pocket, or deep conceal, this is going to hide very well. And with a relatively light weight of, I'll use the 21.4 ounces that I measured, it's not going to be all that heavy. Loaded with 10 rounds of 9mm, you're going to have a compact little package. One of the things I was concerned about was the trigger. Is this going to have as nice of a trigger? And the answer is yes. They did manage to keep that trigger. So you've got a little bit of take-up, nice tight wall, and a super short, crisp break. The trigger comes in around 5.6 ounces. We measured it, it came in around 5.5, 5.6 according to Walther. It's a couple tenths heavier than the PPQ, but not at all overly heavy. So let's go ahead and do the reset and pop the magazine out of here. I still got the trigger back. There's your whole reset, nice and short, just like the PPQ. Just a hair of take-up back on the wall and break. And if you're paying real close attention and do the reset tight, you've still got a little bit of take up, but it's minimal, and then again a short crisp break. So it's got an awesome trigger. This is the trigger, basically it's the same as the PPQ, only off by tenths of an ounce. And a lot of times manufacturers take their larger guns and scale them down. You end up with some issues with the trigger. They ruin the trigger, and that's not the case here. You do have two Picatinny rail slots, so you can put lights, lasers, and other accessories. And you do have very nice 3-dot sights. Now these are just regular standard 3 dots. There is an LE version of it that has photoluminescent, and according to Walther's site, there's actually going to be full-fledged night sights available, like a tritium-based night sight. At this point in time right now, the standard model, the standard edition like this one is all you're going to find. I'm sure if you're watching this video a month or two after the release date, you'll be able to pick from the various other options. One thing you do lose is one backstrap. So it still has replaceable backstraps, and a lot of manufacturers lose that feature when they go smaller. Glock hasn't, but some others have. But instead of coming with 3, it comes with 2. Basically, a large and a small, or a large and a medium. And they come in the box, and you just punch out this little pin. It's actually quite easy to do. And pop the pin out, swap out the back strap, and rock on. It does have a nice texture, very similar to the PPQ. It's a hair more aggressive than the standard one, and I mean just a little bit. If you put the two side by side and you're looking at it with your eyes and you get the light just right, you can see that this is just a little more aggressive. But when you hold it, it really feels about the same. A little bit of a finger groove. So when you've got your hands on it, you got it in a nice grip, it's not going anywhere. but it also is not abrasive at all. You know, when you run your finger across it, it's smooth, and then it's not going to chafe your body or otherwise abrade you. So you've got a good texture, easy to hold on to. The gun's going nowhere, but not painful to hold or aggressive at all. It does have slide stop, slide release that's ambidextrous in the factory. And of course you have the front and rear serrations just like on the standard PPQ. So you can do a press check, grab it from the back. They're aggressive enough that you get a hold of them easily, but not so aggressive that they chew you up. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, this roll pin back here. That's getting a lot of hating. And I'm not a fan of roll pins either. You know, something like this that you do at once, that's fine. So this roll pin back here, what's it actually do? Well, when I get the slide apart, we'll talk about it in more detail. But basically, the only time you would have to remove this roll pin is if you were going to do a full detail strip of the slide, which you do occasionally do, but it's not necessary to do it as part of the main teardown. And what it's got an insert, and I'll show you when I get it apart, to make the slide lighter so it cycles faster. They used a polymer insert for the slide guide, and this retains it. I would have preferred it not to be there, but given the fact that you only have to ever mess with it when you're doing a full detail strip, not a field strip, I can live with its presence. And it doesn't in other way impair the function. But what it does do is with the lighter slide, it cycles fairly quickly, and it changes the recoil impulse. So you've got still the same amount of energy from the 9mm, and it has to be absorbed by the combination of the weight of the gun in your hand. But with the faster cycling slide, you really don't notice the recoil. So the recoil on this felt a lot like a full-size PPQ. It didn't really feel like a subcompact. You didn't get that twisty flippiness that you tend to get, or that sharp recoil that you tend to get with these smaller guns. Overall, the recoil is really very manageable. So what they were doing with the slide and lightening it up and increasing the speed, it actually worked. It also has a dual recoil spring, which I'll show you when I get it apart, which allows basically a two-stage set of weights, so they can again manage that slide behavior. Let's talk about compatibility with the existing things you might have if you have a PPQ. And one of them is holsters. So I've got this IMI holster. Fab Defense, IWI, they keep changing what their name is, but basically it's a high quality outside the waistband holster, and it's Kydex. And Kydex holsters usually are the problem. If you're going to have a fitment issue with a different model, it's going to be with a Kydex holster. So, does it work? Yes, it does. It works perfectly. It drags just a hair more, but not insurmountable. But what I did notice is that this area right here, I'll turn it over, this area right here is beveled differently than on a standard PPQ. You see it kind of kicks up more on a PPQ. It's a little bit sharper, and the distance here is a little shorter, a little longer there. So I have a feeling that's dragging just a hair on the Kydex. But it wasn't so much that the holster doesn't work. It goes in, and it draws smoothly and seamlessly. So is it going to be compatible with your holster? It's quite likely. Now, Kydex holsters do different things with grabbing different parts of the gun for attention, so I can't tell you that every single Kydex holster out there will work, but it's really close. Now, magazines, that's getting some hating too, and they might have earned some of that. In order to handle the faster slide rate, they had to increase the magazine springs. So if you use a stock magazine, like a regular PPQ magazine, theoretically you have to change out the springs to mount it, but you also have to use this little extender. Now let's talk about that extender briefly. This is on the SC magazine. It blends excellent with the grip. It gives you a full 3-finger grip. It's very smooth. It's actually a sleeve, not an extender. But it's also just perfectly smooth, perfectly contoured. This little gap never pinched me. So Walther has really done that right. Like Springfield did with the XDM series, they've kind of got that just perfect. Something Glock never really kind of got the program with. So the sleeve does work very, very well. And this magazine says PPQ SC, so it's easy to identify. But if I were to put the other magazine in, so I'll take this off, quick pause to get that correct. Theoretically, I should be able to just put the magazine in and it should work, but it doesn't. I have to get it turned just right. And what I notice is there's a significant amount of slop. So if I get it turned just right, and actually if I put a little rotate, so I try to rotate it clockwise, it'll lock up every time. If I rotate it counterclockwise, it may not lock up every time. So there is a little issue with using the PPQ magazines, not the SC magazines. One, the spring. Two, you have to have one of these. So allegedly there's going to be a spring kit available, and I don't know if the spring kit will include these, but effectively you're buying this and the spring, and there's another problem, and it has to do with dimensions. So I'm going to do a little bit of measurement here and show you what I found. So I got all set up to do a little measuring and talk about these magazine size differences. The thickness is the same this way, so I'm not going to bother with that. But what I'll notice is this is a regular PPQ magazine. And I'm going to be careful when I insert it because I'm not going to put the sleeve on it. But I'm just going to put it up into the gun until I get some tension. And you'll see that there is a significant amount of play in it. I put this one in there and I'll get some play, but it's significantly less. Even when I try to do it a little bit forcefully, it's a lot less play. And there's a reason for that. If I measure the magazines front to back, so I've got the SC magazine, the one that came with it. Line it up with the magazine retention notch. And I get 31.89. It'll bounce around a little bit depending on how much I squeeze on it, but 31.89. And if I measure this magazine, get it in there right. Of course it doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. 31.68, 31.7. So it's about 0.2 millimeters different, 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters different. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's enough to make the difference in the thickness and the amount of slop. So when I put the sleeve on the actual PPQ magazine and put it in there, I may not always get reliable lockup. I have to push on it. Whereas if I put the sleeve on the SC magazine, the magazine that's intended to be used with it, it goes in there reliably every time and it locks up because it's going in straight. It's not being twisted. It's harder to twist it. So, in summary, don't mess with the spring kits, don't buy the adapters, just buy the PPQ SC magazines when they become available. My suspicion is the magazines for the PPQ, the SC magazines, will become available at the same time the spring kits and the sleeves do. And with the heavier spring, you could have function issues using that magazine in your regular PPQ. So that's an area where they kind of fell down. You don't have good magazine compatibility between the original PPQ and the SC, but the magazines that do come with it are actually quite reliable. So let's get this beast apart, talk about the internals. Taking it apart is easy. Verify clear, pull the trigger, pull it back just a hair, pull down on the tabs, slides right apart. So it comes apart just like a Glock or any of the other polymer wonders that are out there. So I'm going to put the slide down for a moment. We're going to talk about the frame itself, which weighs 5.4 ounces. It's a very light frame. It's very well constructed. Got slide guides at the rear, decent slide guides at the front, lockup assembly, and the trigger bar. And one of the things I noticed about the trigger bar is the trigger bar on the full-size PPQ has two tangs on it, like a forward one and a backward one. But it would look like you might be able to use the slides interchangeably, but you can't because the offset is different. See that little notch there? So it sets in a little bit, and that'll matter when I show you the slide, but the little tang sets in a little bit. So if you were to do a Franken gun and swap out the slides, I don't think you would have reliable deactivation of the drop safety on either gun. It may work occasionally, but don't rely on it assuming it's going to work all the time. Beyond that, fire control groups and everything else is pretty similar to just a regular PPQ. Nice and clean and well done. Now let's move on to the slide. The slide assembly weighs 13.7 ounces, which is actually quite light when you figure the Glock slide weighs about 15.3 ounces, and they're very similar in size. So how did they do that? Well, mostly it's this polymer insert here. So this insert section right through here in the middle, from behind here, behind my fingernail, all the way down to the end is the slide guide, and it's polymer. There's the sear, the end of the striker, and when I said slide guide, I meant to say striker guide. And here's the loading ramp. So there's a steel loading ramp, and then this is part of the actual steel part of the slide. So this insert drops in, and here's the loading ramp, and normally these are all one piece. Now that leads us to one of the problems. I've got a round with me. So while I got the gun apart, I do have a live round. What I found is I would go to cycle it with the slide closed. So you got the slide closed, load a magazine, go to pull back on it, it would come back a little bit and hang up. And what it's doing is it's hanging up a little bit here on the edge of the case, right here. And it would snag. Now sometimes if you did it forcefully, I got rid of that ammo, put that away. If you did it forcefully, it would open up and actually cycle, but not consistently. Sometimes if you really pulled on it, it would work. Sometimes if you didn't, it wouldn't. So I'm going to be calling in Walther, because what I notice is there's a slight rise here. It's going to be real hard to get it on camera. Actually, that angle shows it pretty good. You can see that the feed ramp, or the loading ramp, is a hair lower than that little piece that's attached to the actual slide. So it has the opportunity to hang up, to snag, and it'll catch just a little bit. It did not affect cycling at all. Cycling, I think, is violent enough, and the force vector, the way it's pushes in such a way that's not a problem. But when you're grabbing the slide by hand and trying to cycle it, it did actually cause it to hang up. Most cases, if I just did it like I meant it, it would cycle, but in a few cases, it wouldn't. I had to actually pop the magazine out, lock it open, and do it. We were shooting some aluminum and some brass, and it depended on the ammo. But that is one potential issue that could cause some issues if you're malfunction. You know, tap, rack, bang might be a little bit of a problem. You might tap rack, doesn't want to rack, drop the mags, cycle it kind of thing, and that's kind of an issue. Let's continue on. Got your dual recoil spring. Nice barrel. And the barrel is polygonal rifling, like the Glocks and the full-size PPQ. So you can see it's a much smoother rifling. It's going to get you a little bit higher pressures, a little bit higher velocity, and in theory a little bit better accuracy, better stabilization in a short barrel. Very similar to the full-size PPQ barrel. Putting it back together is also quite easy. Drop the barrel in, drop the magazine spring in, line it up. Now, here is something that you have to be aware of. You have to push down on it a little bit. Not a big deal, just push down on it a little bit. The springs are pushing it up just a hair. And I've had other guns like that, and that's not a problem. It goes together reliably and goes together easily every time. So let me show you a few of the differences, the mechanical differences. So I'm going to take apart this one and the PPQ and set the parts side by side so you can see the differences. Okay, so I've got the full-size PPQ, or the standard PPQ on the top, and the SC on the bottom. Of course, you'll see the recoil springs, dual on the subcompact and one single spring on the top. Now, by the way, this single spring works flawlessly in the full-size PPQ. I think the only difference here is the two stages allow for a little bit of recoil management. Biggest difference, as I mentioned, the loading ramp is one piece, and it's kind of a two-piece on the SC because of this polymer insert. They've moved the drop safety piston. It's right here versus being towards the front. From a functional, does it work standpoint, I don't think there's any difference. I believe it's going to work fine. You'll notice that the striker catch is a little bit different. It's different in length and position. So that's another incompatibility for trying to make a Franken gun. Basically, as far as a Franken gun swapping slides around, I think the answer is just don't. One thing I will notice that I failed to mention when I had it apart before is you'll notice the various parts are labeled 9mm. So that sort of implies that there may be other calibers. Walther hasn't made any noise in that direction, but the fact that they've taken the time to mark the castings with a caliber would imply that they intend to have more than one component at some point, i.e. a 40 and or a 45. So you might be looking forward to that in the future as they work their way through the engineering. Now on the frames, back part, fire control group is very similar, but what you'll notice is right there, 1 versus 2. So on the trigger bar, the position of the location of the little protrusions for the drop safety are different. And you'd think, well, it might work on this one because it's got both. But when you look at it, look at the offset on at the top here. See the offset? It's different. It sticks out further than on the back one on the rear. So I don't think you're going to get reliable deactivation if you try to do that. So pretty much the SC is you use it like like a king. So I'll go ahead and put it back together and use it like a king. If I set them side by side, you'll see some of the positions and some of the notches are a hair different, and the back plate is a little bit different. And this is just the difference between the way the two striker groups are set up. And there's some minor differences on the slides, but one of the biggest ones you'll see is the extractor. The extractor is external on the regular PPQ, and it's internal on the FC. And mostly I think that's just reciprocating mass. Being able to have that extractor work as quickly as it needs to with the faster cycling slide. From a reliability standpoint, I think it's going to be fine. So again, you got your extractor external here, goes that entire length, and it's not present here. That makes the slide look taller. It's not really, it's about the same. It just, without that to break up the lines, it kind of makes it look taller. And at the top, you've got some serrations along the top here. Get some serrations for anti-glare, and here you just have a matte finish. So there are some minor differences, none of them that are overly significant. This one has a viewport because you can't use the extractor to determine if the chamber's loaded. This one doesn't because the extractor's got a little red dot on it. So minor changes they've made to the gun, partially just to get to the functionality that we're looking for in a subcompact. So let's kind of wrap this up with some size comparisons. First off, we'll do subcompact to the full-size PPQ, because of course that's what we're trying to do. Is we wanted a subcompact version of the PPQ, and we got it. So you'll see kind of a significant difference here. I'll get a magazine in this just to make it apples to apples. Significant grip difference, a little over the thickness of a finger, and a decent amount of difference at the front slide. Other than that, they're basically the same. Width, they're going to be the same. As far as thickness, they're going to be the same. Other than the cosmetic differences, the back. So you do have a much smaller gun that retained all of the ergonomics of the PPQ that it's based on. And of course, we can also compare it to the P99 AS. So we'll set them down the same way. Length perspective, they're almost the same. Height perspective, the P99 is just a hair taller, but not significantly. So really, the PPQ SC is the modern iteration of the P99C. Effectively, basically uses the PPQ mechanism, but it's the sizing of this. And then, of course, its major competitor, which is the Glock. And I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to put the Glock in the front because the Glock is smaller. Now ignore the laser that's on the trigger group, but you see the Glock is shorter in each dimension. So overall, not a significant difference, not enough of a difference to make it where one's not going to hold or the other. I can't carry one versus the other. They're small amount of differences. But this is a little bit smaller, the Glock 26. And then from a thickness standpoint, the PPQ looks to be bigger overall. It's really not. It's about the same thickness. It's just the curvature kind of makes it look a lot taller, which it really isn't when you line them up. It's almost maybe a tenth of an inch at most. Just the shape of it makes it look a lot taller, and it looks wider at the base, but it's all about the same size. Just the optical effect. You don't want to look at that. That's a Glock. So overall, the gun has been very reliable, other than that little issue with cycling against a loaded mag. It fed everything we fed it, which brass, we fed it some aluminum. Basically everything we had on hand went through it with no malfunctions whatsoever. It was easy to shoot well. Took a little getting used to, but once you got used to it, it was really easy to shoot well. And it really is a nice gun to have. So They're a little late to the game, but I do think they stepped up and came to the game with a really good entry. So if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, and have a great day. Thank you.